What's up everyone, it's Endymion, and as you may be aware, this weekend the new Dungeons & Dragons movie is set to release. It stars Chris Pine and others on a quest to save the land from evil forces, and it's also going to likely flop incredibly hard. Some may say it's because it's not a superhero movie, others will claim because it looks like generic fantasy. But the true reason is something that's been a blight on modern entertainment for far too long, which is the sin of emasculating strong male characters at the expense of comedy or female representation. And I'll be using footage in this video of some of my favorite strong male characters, but let me know what your favorites are as well in the comments. If you weren't aware, there was a rather infamous article from Comic Book Resources that reignited this entire conversation. The article is titled, "The Dungeons & Dragons movie intentionally emasculates its leading men," with the sub-headline saying, "The Dungeons & Dragons movie's writing team revealed they intentionally emasculated the leading men in the film and put the women on the front lines." This single article's headline should be studied for how catastrophic it will be to the film's financial success, as I honestly believe an article like this will have severe detrimental effects on not only the D&D franchise, but the future of movies too. I know it sounds like hyperbole, but I'm being serious. The article then says, and I quote, "John Francis Daly and Jonathan Goldstein revealed they intentionally emasculated the film's leading men, though not for wokeness." While speaking with Variety, Daly and Goldstein discussed how Michelle Rodriguez's Hulga the Barbarian and Sophia Lilith's Doric the Druid tend to engage in the front lines of battle compared to their male party members. "That was not an attempt at wokeness on our part," Goldstein said. Daly elaborated saying, "Swear to God it wasn't. We liked that Hulga is the bruiser that does the dirty work for Edgar and he doesn't like to get his hands dirty. We also love emasculating leading men." After reiterating that the reasons did not pertain to woke thinking, the pair explained that they wrote the men that way because they find it funny and fresh, pointing to Rachel McAdams and Jason Bateman's characters in Date Night, which Daly and Goldstein also wrote. They also aim to do something similar with Tom Holland's Peter Parker and Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark in Spider-Man: Homecoming. "We like our male heroes to be challenged and not simply heroic," Goldstein explained. It's something that the pair found surprisingly difficult to achieve with leading actors in their films. While they did not name names, they noted that they'd had experiences with a couple of male actors in the past who refused to look weak or vulnerable in a film, end quote. That last part is particularly interesting to me because of how loud it exemplifies what many are thinking these days. In the past year alone, what have been some of the biggest movies? Well, one of them was Avatar: The Way of Water. While that movie was so long I felt like I aged 70 years watching it, I have to praise James Cameron for making Jake Sully a masculine leading man. Jake is a loving father and a formidable warrior, yet his masculinity does not undermine or overshadow the strength of his wife Neytiri. And the same can be said about Neytiri as well. In most movies, games, or shows, these days men are often emasculated to make way for modern strong women. Neytiri, however, is the opposite of this. She is just as lethal and badass as any other woman, but doesn't make Jake or the other men bow to her femininity. She is both powerful and respected and is seen as an equal to Jake, which is why it wasn't a surprise that Avatar made gangbusters. On the flip side, we have a more recent Marvel flop in the form of Quantumania. Scott Lang is undermined by the presence of his daughter, who's better than him in every way imaginable. She's smarter, faster, and is even capable of making a quantum nonsense device that allows her to fully map out the entirety of an unknown universe, which she also made in a garage no less. Ugh. Also, she protests and berates her dad for having to bail her out. She's the ultimate modern feminine woman that woke activists champion for. A character so unbelievably overpowered and capable that she ascends above everything around her simply because she's a woman. And despite being a Marvel film featuring Kang's major debut, the film flopped, which honestly should have been an easy slam dunk. But it's clear that the audience at large is tired of this annoying trope. And what's the movie that's currently killing it at the box office as of the making of this video? Well, that would be, of course, John Wick Chapter 4. Another good old-fashioned action flick where the leading man is both masculine, lethal, and confident. John Wick is the epitome of what audiences want right now. They don't want sissy cuck boys and spoony bards afraid of getting their hands dirty. They want badass leading men who charge into danger and then stare death in its face. And to no one's surprise, John Wick not only dominated the box office, it made back its entire budget and a half in just 3 days of release. John Wick as a franchise would not work if Keanu Reeves stood at the sidelines while the girl bosses yassified their ways to success. Unlike Chris Pine's Bard in D&D, John Wick revels in getting his hands dirty. He kills with no remorse and barely has any lines in his own movie, allowing his actions to do all the talking. And I'm not kidding, Keanu Reeves says less than 400 words in the entirety of Chapter 4 and people loved it. Keanu also does the majority of his own stunts, and the film features plenty of diversity as well while not undermining or sidelining its leading man. John Wick is the logical response to a pussified modern Hollywood. It's a franchise wholly focused on delivering the most crowd-pleasing action blockbuster. And it's no surprise that audiences were seated and eager to experience Wick's latest Symphony of Blood. And it's very likely in John Wick's second week at the box office that it'll cannibalize Dungeons & Dragons as well. Because what would you rather see? A badass leading man being masculine, or Cuckboy and his goober friends standing on the sidelines while the women do all the fighting? In the new D&D movie, you have Michelle Rodriguez playing the berserker Holga, who's essentially the muscle of the film. She also really wants you to know that she grew her armpit hair out for the movie too, which makes me want to see the film even less. I really don't understand what these actors and studios are thinking, but people don't care or want to see masculine women in film. Why can't a woman be badass but also revel in her feminine side? It's honestly kind of sexist that Michelle Rodriguez thought the only way to make her character in D&D look strong was to be less like a woman. Whereas on the flip side with John Wick, you have standout characters like Akira, who's both feminine and badass. And people loved Akira so much that fans are openly demanding a spin-off film featuring Rina Sawayama's character. Whereas nobody would want to see Michelle Rodriguez's armpit berserker in her own spin-off film. Well, maybe certain people would, but let's be real, those people just say they support stuff without actually supporting things. They just like the idea of supporting things, then get mad when those things flop because they never put their money where their mouths are. Anyway, the next major movie coming to theaters is the Super Mario Bros. Movie, which is likely going to be a massive success. And apparently in its original script, Peach was going to be like Michelle Rodriguez, doing all the action and badassery while Mario and his male friends sit on the sidelines. And what could have been a woke disaster that would have ruined Mario, instead Nintendo stepped in and said the script had to be changed in order to make Mario the leading man. Of course, the middle ground between the traditional East and woke West was that Princess Peach couldn't be a damsel in distress. Even though that's exactly what she's been for 30 plus years of video games, but in the new flick, Peach will be more of a, girl boss, which is another term that makes me cringe. She'll be rallying her subjects for war against Bowser and his Koopas, but since the movie, as of now anyway, hasn't been released, I can't say if they're successful or not. But I seriously hope Mario doesn't get sidelined in his own movie, but it does seem that Luigi will instead be the damsel of distress over Peach. Which is kind of a cheap exchange, but I guess this way at least, the movie has a strong male and female lead. Or I hope it does anyway, I guess we'll see when it comes out. But if you're watching this in the future, let me know. Did Mario get sidelined? God, I hope not. Another great example of strong male representation in media these days would be the Creed franchise. Over the past month, my girlfriend and I have watched the first two flicks, and very recently we saw Creed 3, which we both thought was the best of the trilogy. Creed 3 features an emotional story with actual stakes that centers its villain at the heart of its conflict that goes beyond the ring itself. Jonathan Majors plays Damian Diamond Anderson, the former childhood best friend of Adonis Creed who's been in prison for 18 years. After finally being released, Damian seeks out Adonis, who's been living the boxing champion life that Damian believes was robbed of him by Adonis. It creates this exceptional dichotomy of two extremely masculine male characters fighting for their futures while being fueled by the demons of their past. Adonis is portrayed as a loving father and feels honestly weird in today's modern world. A father who deeply cares for his family and the people around him. He's a positive role model for male moviegoers and females too, and then you have Damian, who Majors plays like a wounded animal who's ready to explode. Damian is the physical manifestation of toxic masculinity in its most bare form, a monster of a man who's come to burn down the Creed kingdom. The film successfully portrays these two men as two sides of the same coin and what one bad day or one poor decision can do when it comes to shaping your life. And once these two eventually fight in the film's climax, it's filled with excitement but also despair. To see two men who once saw each other as the only family they ever knew battling it out in order to prove whose ideals are right and whether time truly can heal all wounds. The women of Creed are strong as well, but it's this core display of strong male representation that anchors the film and makes it sing. Every punch feels like an explosion, and the way that final fight in particular is shot, it feels like it comes right out of an anime, which it was also heavily inspired by, even to very blatant degrees at times. But regardless, Creed 3 is a home run because it doesn't portray its men or women as weak, but as people. They're flawed and they're willing to fight to protect what they love. And it's no surprise that Creed 3 made $250 million and it's the highest performing in the franchise. So like John Wick Chapter 4, audiences came out to see Creed 3. And I think films like these prove that people want more, not just from their movies, but from true authentic male representation. And when you cater to these needs, you get rewarded. But that's unfortunately not true for every modern movie these days. What's really peculiar about the new D&D movie is that usually on Rotten Tomatoes, the audience scores aren't available until after the movie's official release. Which makes sense since audiences have to, see the movie once it comes out to rate it. Yet D&D suspiciously already allowed audience members to rate it well before it came out, so why is that? Likely, it's due to articles like I've explained earlier about emasculating the male characters that's kryptonite to modern moviegoers. Things like that will definitely repel people away from going out to see things, and I have a creeping suspicion that D&D's audience score being open so early is the studio trying to make the film look more enticing to win people back. The film is predicted by Paramount to have a $65 million plus opening, which is wishful thinking on Paramount's part. Right now, the film is predicted to make around the $30 to $40 million mark instead, meaning D&D is currently looking to make about as much as Shazam! Fury of the Gods did, which was another stinker from DC Comics that also failed miserably. Not to mention, D&D costed around $150 million to make, so a $30 to $40 million opening is, well, it's not great. But this is what happens when you put weak portrayals of men in today's modern entertainment. But even when it comes to video games, we're seeing what having a strong, confident male character can do for sales. Recently, Resident Evil 4 Remake released, and not only is that game just as amazing as it was when it first released, it features a strong male lead in the form of Leon S. Kennedy. RE4 feels like an anomaly in today's video game landscape as well, since it's not open world or a live service game. And even though it's a remake, it's resonating just as strongly now with consumers as it did all the way back on the GameCube. RE4 Remake sold over 3 million copies in just 3 days, which is insane. But it's because not only is the game amazing, but again, it's because it features a strong male lead who isn't sidelined. I know some may say it sounds like you're intimidated by women in leading roles, but it couldn't be further from the truth. I clearly love games like Resident Evil and characters like Claire Redfield or Jill Valentine. Having strong female characters is a good thing for media, but like I've said in previous videos before, it shouldn't come at the cost of strong male leads. Avatar: The Way of Water would be a lesser film if Jake or Neytiri played second place to each other. John Wick is resonating, and so are characters like Leon for all the same reasons. They're giving audiences strong male representation, and then things like D&D are giving people what they've been tired of for years. But it seems for every John Wick win, we are also taking steps back. Mindy Kaling was recently awarded the National Medal of Arts from the human flesh puppet himself, Joe Biden, who likely didn't even know where he was or what he was doing there to begin with.
How do you even do Grandmasters? I can barely do the legendary campaign. My teammates keep telling me to build craft, but I don't even know what that is.
Just go back to bed, Sleepy Joe, and leave the destiny grind to the professionals.
Nevertheless, Kaling was awarded after making sludge like Velma for HBO Max, a show that not only ruins Scooby-Doo but presents all of its male characters as weak and incompetent. And while we're speaking about Mindy Kaling, did you know her brother wrote an entire book about pretending to be black and then using that to get himself into medical school? Like, I'm not kidding either. Look it up. That's a real thing. He actually pretended to be black so he would be accepted. It's crazy, but also 100% true as well. Anyway, there's even countries that outright ban the use of feminine men in media. China, a few years back, made it illegal for Chinese media to portray men as weak or feminine. They even went as far as to ban idol shows, girly boy bands, and push for traditional Chinese culture and values instead. And while I agree less of these tropes is a good thing, I don't agree banning them to the degree that China has is the answer either. I think the Western world right now is very clearly showing that people are tired of this naturally. If I see or hear anything that undermines men and makes them kneel and act weak in order to uplift others, I simply will not support it. Ultimately, it's up to the audiences to decide whether they support the concept of the emasculation of men in media, and I think it's very clear that people are growing ever more tired of it. So in the end, the emasculation of men may hopefully become something of the past. Like a bitter memory we've all looked back on and cringed at, like seeing our yearbook photos years later. Because a world without strong men is a world destined to fail, and to alienate or vilify the hard-working masculine men of the world in some deluded crusade of woke ideology will do nothing but ruin the world for the worse. The men of the world built and designed many of the things you and I use today. That does not undermine the importance of women, but ignoring these blatant truths is ridiculous as well. So my answer to woke Hollywood and the idiots who push these things is that I, along with many others, will never support or bend the knee to this nonsense. So open your eyes and realize that we're all stronger when we aren't putting each other down, and finally, stop ruining men.